Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 1st of March of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today have been presented on your screen. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. On page number 1, we have an article which is titled as US strikes a deal with Taliban to end the 18-year Afghan war. Now, this particular article highlights that US and Taliban have recently signed a peace deal after months of negotiations in Doha. The peace deal has finally put an end to US 18-year long war in Afghanistan. Such a peace deal will pave a way for US to gradually withdraw its troops from Afghanistan. Now, the article that we are going to discuss here shall be important mainly from the perspective of GS Paper 2 International Relations under the subsection India and its neighborhood relations as well as bilateral agreements affecting India's interest. Now, the signing of peace deal between USA and Taliban has foreign policy implications for India, wherein some of the experts have pointed out that since Taliban is set to gain the political legitimacy in Afghanistan, India needs to reorient its policy towards Afghanistan. Hence, we shall discuss this particular article in much greater detail, wherein we'll discuss as to what factors led to the peace negotiations between US and Taliban, what exactly is the peace deal that has recently been signed between US and Taliban, to what extent the peace deal would bring a lasting peace in Afghanistan, the concerns raised with the peace deal, and what should India do in order to reorient its foreign policy towards Afghanistan. So let us understand first as to what factors led to the peace negotiations between US and Taliban. USA initially started the war in Afghanistan post the 9/11 attacks. The United States of America had basically two objectives to be fulfilled with its war in Afghanistan. The first objective was to eliminate Al-Qaeda and its leader Osama bin Laden, and the second objective was to decimate Taliban, which was extending support to various terrorist organizations. However, in spite of waging almost around 18 years long war, spending almost around $1 trillion and losing around 2,000 US soldiers, the United States of America has been able to eliminate only the Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. However, it has failed to decimate the Taliban. So this particular failure of USA to decimate Taliban has led to the growing influence of Taliban in Afghanistan, wherein according to some of the experts, Taliban presently controls around 50% of the Afghanistan's territory. Taliban is also against the democratically elected Afghanistan government. This is so because Taliban believes that the democratically elected Afghan government is merely a puppet government. Taliban has also been advocating for the imposition of the strong Sharia law, which does not take into account the human rights of the Afghans. More importantly, Taliban has also maintained close relationship with Pakistan as well. Now, after waging almost 18 years long war, the United States of America has come to a conclusion that it is not in a position to defeat Taliban in Afghanistan. And since it has already spent a huge amount of money and lost a number of soldiers' life, the United States of America is presently seeking a honorable exit from Afghanistan. So accordingly, during the election campaign, the President Donald Trump had promised the people of USA that he would take all the necessary steps to bring back the US troops from Afghanistan. Subsequently, when Trump went on to become the president of USA, he fast-tracked the process of the peace negotiations with Taliban. So what exactly is the peace deal that has been signed between USA and Taliban recently? Now, according to this particular peace deal, both USA as well as Taliban are required to fulfill certain commitments, wherein the United States of America has highlighted that it is ready to fulfill its own set of commitments provided Taliban adhere to its commitments. Wherein, according to this particular peace deal, US has committed that it would reduce its troops from present strength of 13,000 to 8,600 in the next 135 days. So based upon the level of adherence by Taliban to its commitments, USA would ensure complete withdrawal of all the foreign troops, including the NATO troops, within the next 14 months. Apart from that, as a gesture of goodwill, the Taliban government has stated that it is ready to release almost around 5,000 Taliban fighters. On the other hand, Taliban has given a commitment or a guarantee that it would not allow the Afghan territory to be used by any of the terrorist organizations against USA or its allies. The Taliban has also agreed to a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire in Afghanistan. Apart from that, as stated earlier, the Taliban was not ready to engage in direct talks with the democratically elected Afghan government because it believed that the Afghan government is a puppet government. However, now Taliban has given a commitment that it is ready to participate in the intra-Afghan talks. So there are mainly two implications of this particular peace deal signed between US and Taliban. The first implication would be the withdrawal of all the foreign troops within 14 months. So as the US troops start withdrawing from Afghanistan, Taliban has given a commitment that it is ready to participate in the intra-Afghan talks with the democratically elected Afghan government as well as all other stakeholders in Afghanistan. Further, as a gesture of goodwill, Taliban has also given a commitment that it is ready to release almost around 1,000 Afghans. So having understood as to what exactly is a peace deal, let us now understand as to what extent the peace deal would be able to bring peace to Afghanistan. Let us first understand as to how the peace deal can benefit India. Now, some of the experts have pointed out that the Taliban that we see today may be completely different from the Taliban that we saw 20 years ago. After waging war for almost 18 years with USA, the experts have pointed out that Taliban may have substantially toned down on their violent activities. Accordingly, there could be a possible change in stance of Taliban which is good for India. Now, such a possible change in stance of Taliban can be seen in terms of number of facets. For instance, earlier the Taliban was not ready to negotiate with the Afghan government and it considered the Afghan government to be a puppet government. However, now the Taliban is ready to negotiate not only with the Afghan government but all other stakeholders in Afghanistan. The second aspect of change in stance of Taliban can be seen in the fact that the Taliban has agreed for a complete ceasefire. It is to be noted that even before the signing of this particular peace deal, USA and Taliban were set to sign the peace deal last year. However, such a peace deal could not go through since Taliban violated the ceasefire. However, this time before signing the peace deal, President Donald Trump had stated that he is ready to sign the peace deal provided Taliban did not involve in any violent activities for a period of 7 days. So since Taliban was not involved in violent activities and had completely observed the ceasefire, the peace deal was signed this time. So this once again goes on to show that Taliban to a certain extent has toned down on its violent operations. Apart from that, recently the deputy leader of Taliban known as Sirajuddin Haqqani has written an article in New York Times. Now through this particular article, Sirajuddin Haqqani has enunciated as to what would be the policy stance of Taliban after the signing of the peace deal. Taliban has stated that it is ready to work for a consensus-oriented government. That is, Taliban would not try to form the government on its own. Rather, it will involve in talks with all the Afghan stakeholders and accordingly form a government which would be acceptable to all the stakeholders. Secondly, in his article, he has also written that Taliban would completely give up the violence and ensure basic human rights for all the Afghan citizens. Now, such a possible change in the stance of Taliban is a good news for India since India was quite apprehensive that Taliban may come back to power and this may go against India's interest. The second benefit for India can be seen from the 7-point action plan which was unveiled by the Afghan government. The 7-point action plan of the Afghan government basically enunciates as to how would the Afghan government deal with Taliban after the signing of the peace deal. In its 7-point action plan, the Afghan government has clearly stated that the Afghan government would continue to work with the regional stakeholders such as India in the intra-Afghan talks once the peace deal is signed. So going forward, after the signing of the peace deal, the intra-Afghan talks are going to be held and India is going to play a prominent role in the intra-Afghan talks. Apart from that, one notable aspect of the peace deal is that the peace deal has paved a way for a Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled peace process. Now, India was always in favor of such a peace process and India is set to play a prominent role in these intra-Afghan talks. Thirdly, So far, the United States of America was heavily dependent on Pakistan in order to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table. But now, since the peace deal has already been signed between USA and Taliban, some of the experts have pointed out that going forward, the United States of America would be less dependent on Pakistan in the South Asian region. Now, in spite of these benefits associated with the peace deal, a number of experts have highlighted that the signing of peace deal is just one facet of ensuring peace in Afghanistan. The ultimate success of the peace deal would obviously depend upon the extent to which Taliban would abide by its commitment of the complete ceasefire. Accordingly, the experts have raised a number of questions with respect to signing of this particular peace deal. Some of these questions are: will Taliban really agree to a consensus oriented government in Afghanistan? What is the guarantee that the Taliban that we are seeing today is different from the Taliban that we saw 20 years ago? And what would happen to Afghanistan in future once the foreign troops start withdrawing? So a number of questions even today remain unanswered. So only time will tell us as to whether the peace deal would be successful. Nevertheless, let us look at some of the concerns which have been raised with respect to the signing of the peace deal. First and foremost, we have to realize that the Afghan tribal society is fractured along the ethnic lines, such as the Pashtuns versus the non-Pashtuns. So, to a certain extent, the presence of foreign troops in Afghanistan ensured peace and stability in Afghanistan. However, once the foreign troops starts withdrawing, these tensions in the Afghan society will once again resurface. People belonging to different ethnicities may try to form the government on their own, leading to the widening of the intra-Afghan tensions. So going forward, the success of the peace deal would depend upon to what extent the different stakeholders in Afghanistan are able to negotiate with each other in a peaceful, meaningful and sustained dialogue. Secondly, India has offered huge amount of financial assistance to Afghanistan, wherein India is presently the largest aid donor to Afghanistan in the entire South Asian region. India has offered assistance to Afghanistan for construction of its parliament building. It has offered assistance for the construction of the Garland Highway, which is also referred to as the Delaram Zaranj Highway in Afghanistan. It has also offered assistance for the construction of Salma Dam and so on. Now, because of these investment in Afghanistan, India has been able to earn huge amount of goodwill among the Afghan people. However, going forward, if Taliban comes back to power, concerns have been raised as to what would happen to India's investment in Afghanistan. Whether India would continue to have this goodwill among the Afghan people, will India's interest be protected or not? Thirdly, presently Pakistan is focusing on its two borders, that is the border with Afghanistan as well as the borders with India. However, the signing of the peace deal between USA and Taliban would lead to a greater amount of stability along the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. That is why some of the experts have pointed out that the greater amount of stability along the Afghan-Pakistan border would enable Pakistan to divert more amount of its resources towards its border with India. So the diversion of resources by Pakistan towards its border with India would lead to greater amount of tensions along the Indo-Pak border. Fourthly, recently elections were conducted in Afghanistan. However, the election results were quite controversial. Even though Ashraf Ghani was declared as the president, but his opponent Abdullah has rejected the election results. So there is an infighting even within the Afghan government between the Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah. Now both these leaders have a powerful support base among the Afghan people. So the question which arises here is that how would the weak Afghan government deal with the resurgent Taliban, which has now gained the political legitimacy in Afghanistan? Apart from that, experts have pointed out that the Afghan National Army is too weak to control Taliban if Taliban resorts back to its violent activities once the foreign troops start withdrawing. Nextly, so far the international community led by USA took a lot of interest in ensuring peace and stability in Afghanistan. Now, such an interest of the international community led by USA was primarily on the fact that its troops were stationed in Afghanistan. So going forward, once the foreign troops start withdrawing from Afghanistan, the international community would take less amount of interest in Afghanistan, and peace and stability in Afghanistan would in turn be jeopardized. Lastly, we have to realize that the signing of the peace deal between Taliban and USA was possible because of the fact that Pakistan was able to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table. So going forward, Pakistan is going to play a very dominant role in the intra-Afghan talks. So the Pakistan's main objective in Afghanistan is to have a more amount of strategic depth in Afghanistan. Now such an objective of Pakistan has been fulfilled through the signing of the peace deal. So overall, now the question arises as to what should be the India's foreign policy towards Afghanistan to deal with Taliban, which has now gained political legitimacy in Afghanistan. Now, first and foremost, India should play a more prominent role in the intra-Afghan talks and ensure that there is a greater amount of peace and stability in Afghanistan. Secondly, as stated before, India has earned huge amount of goodwill in Afghanistan due to its investment. So going forward, India should be able to leverage such a goodwill in its own interest. And lastly, now there is a greater need for India to work with regional partners such as Russia and China in order to ensure peace and stability in Afghanistan. Now, based upon our video analysis, a main question for your practice here could be examine the implications of the recent peace deal between USA and Taliban on India's foreign policy towards Afghanistan. Now, you can try writing answer to this particular question based upon our video analysis. Next, on page number 10, we have an article which highlights that Prime Minister Modi has launched a number of development projects across India. Now, one of the most important development project is related to the setting up of 10,000 farmer producer organizations across India. Hence, as part of this video analysis, we'll understand as to what are farmer producer organization, the differences between the farmer producer companies and cooperatives, how the setting up of the farmer producer organization can benefit the Indian farmers. Now, the article that we are going to discuss here shall be important mainly from the perspective of GS paper 3 economy under the subsection Indian agriculture. Now, the farmer producer organization is a legal entity that is set up by the farmers. So a group of farmers can come together and register an organization known as the farmer producer organization. Now, such an organization can be registered either as a cooperative under the Cooperative Societies Act. They can register the organization as a company under the Companies Act, or they can also register the organization as a society under the Societies Registration Act. So the farmer producer organization can be in the form of a cooperative, it can be the form of a company, or it can even be the form of a society. So those farmer producer organizations which are registered under the Companies Act, these farmer producer organizations are referred to as the farmer producer companies. So some of the essential features of the farmer producer organizations are, in these organizations, the farmers are the primary shareholders. They are registered as a legal entity. So as discussed before, they can be registered as a cooperative society, company, or a society. And such an organization is basically set up for the benefit of farmers, wherein such an organization would enable the farmers to procure various kinds of inputs such as the seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, etc. They also help the farmers in the adoption of technology. Apart from that, once the crops are harvested, the farmers can come together and sell the farms combinedly in the market. Apart from that, whatever profits the farmer producer organization earns, a certain percentage of these profits is distributed among the farmers, and the remaining profits can then be used for the expansion of the business of the farmer producer organization. Now, in case of India, the small and marginal farmers, that is those farmers who own less than 2 hectares of land, these farmers account for almost around 86% of the farming community. However, the small and marginal farmers face a number of constraints, such as they face problems with respect to purchase of inputs. Moreover, the agricultural produce of the small and marginal farmers is quite less, so because of which their bargaining power in the market is quite lower as compared to the large farmers. So one way to empower these small and marginal farmers is to organize these small and marginal farmers into some kind of collective organization. Now, in order to benefit the small and marginal farmers, earlier the government of India used to organize these small and marginal farmers into form of the cooperatives. However, in case of India, the cooperatives are facing a number of problems such as the lack of transparency, political interference in the working of cooperatives, corruption, and so on. So overall, the cooperatives have not been able to bring sufficient amount of success for the government of India. So in order to address this particular problem, now the government of India has been proposing to set up the farmer producer companies for the benefit of the small and marginal farmers. So let us understand as to how these farmer producer companies are better than the cooperatives. Now, as discussed before, if a FPO is registered as a company under the Companies Act, then such an FPO would be called as the farmer producer company. So a farmer producer company is a company which is registered under the Companies Act, whereas a cooperative is registered under the Cooperative Societies Act of the respective state government. Apart from that, one of the important aspects of the farmer producer company is that they are considered to be a kind of hybrid between the companies and the cooperative. So just like how the private sector companies are professionally managed, even these farmer producer companies are also professionally managed. Similarly, just like how the cooperatives work on the principle of the mutual cooperation, even these farmer producer companies also work on the same principle. So in a way, the farmer producer companies are considered to be a much better version of the cooperative societies since they can be professionally managed just like a private sector company. With respect to who can be the members, in case of farmer producer companies, both individuals as well as groups such as the self-help groups can be members. However, in case of cooperatives, only individuals can be members and groups such as the self-help groups cannot be the members. With respect to who can vote, in case of farmer producer companies, only the primary shareholders, that is the farmers, can vote. However, in case of cooperatives, apart from the farmers, even the state government also exercise the veto power over the decisions of the cooperatives. Now, such exercise of the veto power by the state government in turn gives a scope for the political interference in the working of cooperatives. And such kind of political interference in turn leads to unnecessary bureaucratic delays and inefficiencies in the working of cooperatives. However, in case of farmer producer companies, since the government does not enjoy the veto power, there is less scope for political interference and hence the farmer producer companies are much more efficient than the cooperatives. Apart from that, the farmer producer companies are also efficient as compared to cooperatives because the farmer producer companies are allowed to appoint the professionals on their board of directors. However, in case of cooperatives, the cooperatives need to take the prior approval of the government in order to appoint the professionals to its board of directors. And lastly, the regulatory regime for the farmer producer companies is quite stronger, which in turn leads to a greater amount of financial discipline and accountability of these farmer producer companies. However, in case of cooperatives, the regulatory regime happens to be quite poor, leading to inefficiencies. Now, presently in case of India, we have almost around 5,000 farmer producer organizations, and out of these 5,000 FPOs, 3,200 FPOs are registered as the farmer producer companies. Now, in spite of immense benefits associated with the farmer producer companies, these farmer producer companies are facing a number of challenges. The first and foremost challenge of the farmer producer companies is related to lack of professional management. As discussed before, presently the farmer producer companies are allowed to appoint the professionals on their board of directors so as to efficiently manage their operations. However, presently such kind of professionals are not available in the rural areas to manage the FPOs efficiently. So the lack of availability of these professionals in the rural areas is in turn adversely affecting the farmer producer companies. Secondly, most of the farmer producer companies are owned and managed by the small and marginal farmers. However, the amount of finances which can be contributed by the small and marginal farmers is quite lower, and this has in turn led to the poor financial resources of the farmer producer companies. The third problem can be related to lack of access to credit. Normally, in case of India, it has been observed that banks and various financial institutions are normally reluctant to lend loans to the farmer producer companies that are owned and managed by the small and marginal farmers. This is so because the amount of land owned by the small and marginal farmers is quite poor, and the small and marginal farmers are not able to provide any kind of collateral in order to avail the loans. Nextly, presently there is lack of awareness among the farmers about the potential benefits of joining the farmer producer companies. Further, most of the farmers are not aware about the legal and technical knowledge about the various acts and regulations related to the formation of the farmer producer companies. Lastly, in case of India, one of the best model of cooperative development happens to be the Amul model. In case of Amul, people came together and formed cooperatives in order to market their milk. Apart from that, people also did substantial amount of value addition to the milk by selling various milk based products. So the ultimate success of a cooperative not only depends upon the extent to which it is able to sell its primary produce, but it also depends upon its ability to do substantial amount of value addition. Now in case of the farmer producer companies which are particularly owned and managed by the small and marginal farmers, usually these farmer producer companies do not have access to infrastructure in order to carry out the value addition. So this particular failure of the farmer producer companies in order to carry out the value addition is once again considered to be one of the biggest hindrance for their success. So keeping in mind the various challenges and benefits associated with the farmer producer organizations, the government of India has taken a number of initiatives in order to promote the farmer producer organization. In case of India, it is the Small Farmers Agri-Business Consortium, which is also known as the SFAC, which is a nodal agency for the promotion of the farmer producer organization. Presently, the SFAC is operating the Credit Guarantee Fund in order to enable the farmer producer companies to avail the credit from the banks and financial institutions. Apart from that, the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development is operating two funds for the benefit of the FPOs. These two funds are the Producer Organization Development Fund and the Produce Fund. The Producer Organization Development Fund basically seeks to provide for the credit to the FPOs. It seeks to provide for the necessary training and capacity building of the members, and it also provides a market linkages for the farmer producer organizations. With respect to Produce Fund, the Produce Fund of the NABARD is basically set up in order to promote the new farmer producer organization. As part of this particular fund, NABARD supports the initial financial requirements of the farmer producer organizations. Thus, as discussed, the farmer producer companies hold immense potential in order to alleviate the present agrarian distress and pull out a large number of small and marginal farmers out of poverty. So whatever success we have achieved with respect to the Amul model of development in the cooperative sector, we need to replicate the same success with respect to the farmer producer companies for the benefit of the small and marginal farmers. Now based upon a video analysis, a mains question for your practice here is, the farmer producer companies can emerge as a game changer in order to alleviate the present agrarian distress. However, the farmer producer companies face a number of challenges and constraints. Discuss. Next, we have a set of articles on page number 12 and page number 15. Now, these two articles are mainly important from your prelims perspective under the subsection Science and Technology. Now, these two articles highlight that recently astronomers have discovered around 17 new exoplanets based upon the data which was gathered through the Kepler Space Telescope. Apart from that, the article also highlights that presently astronomers are studying a habitable exoplanet known as K2-18b. So let us understand in brief about what exactly are exoplanets and about the Kepler mission. Now, exoplanets are basically those planets that remain outside our solar system. Most of the exoplanets are considered to be part of the star systems. According to NASA, there are almost around 3,450 exoplanets outside our solar system. Now, the search for exoplanets is basically our search for alien life and habitable space beyond our solar system. Now, among these exoplanets, some of the exoplanets are considered to be the habitable exoplanets. Now, the habitable exoplanets are those exoplanets that orbit at a specific distance from their stars, and at such a distance the liquid water can exist on their surface. Now, the zone in which these habitable exoplanets can be formed is referred to as the Goldilocks zone. With respect to Kepler mission, the Kepler mission was launched by NASA in the year 2009 in order to search for the exoplanets. The basic objective of Kepler mission was to find for the Earth-like planets which can harbor life outside our solar system. One of the biggest achievements of Kepler mission is that it has been able to discover more than 2600 exoplanets outside our solar system. However, please note that the Kepler mission recently got retired in the year 2018, and the successor to the Kepler mission is the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite. Now, the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite is on a 2-year mission to search for the exoplanets. Next, we have an article on page number 15. The article reads as presence of colistin resistance bacteria of the food origin in the gut is a cause of worry. This article shall be important mainly with respect to prelims under the subsection Science and Technology. Now, this particular article highlights that recently scientists have carried out a study of the stool samples from some of the patients in Chennai. In this particular study, scientists have found out that almost around 51% patients harbor the colistin resistant bacteria in their gut. Now, the antimicrobial resistance in case of India has become a growing concern. The antimicrobial resistance basically means that the disease causing organisms such as bacteria, parasites, fungi, etc. become ineffective to medicines, and these microorganisms are in turn referred to as the superbugs. So let us understand as to how people develop the colistin resistant bacteria in their gut. Now, colistin is considered to be one of the last resort antibiotic which is used to treat a number of bacterial infections such as pneumonia, meningitis, and other infections that are caused by the E. coli. Now, this particular article highlights that the bacteria found in the human gut known as the Klebsiella pneumonia has developed the colistin resistance. Now, the development of colistin resistance bacteria in the human gut can be attributed to mainly two factors, that is, the hospital origin and the food origin. Now, with respect to hospital origin, there are a number of reasons as to why the bacteria in the human gut may have developed the colistin resistance. Some of these reasons could be the inappropriate consumption of antibiotics, particularly when the people do not complete the entire dosage of the antibiotics. This could also be linked to access to antibiotics without the prescription of the doctors or to the self-medication of the antibiotic colistin. So, on account of these hospital-related factors, the bacteria in the human gut may develop the colistin resistance. Apart from that, the bacteria may also develop the colistin resistance mainly due to the food origin. Now, this is so because the colistin, which is a last resort antibiotic, is also used in the poultry industry as a growth promoter. So, due to the overusage of colistin in the poultry industry, the poultry birds develop the colistin resistant bacteria in their gut. So, when the meat of such poultry birds is consumed by the humans, this in turn leads to a transfer of the colistin resistant bacteria from the poultry to the human beings. Apart from that, the animal feces in the poultry industry may also contain the colistin resistant bacteria. Usually, such kind of animal waste are used as fertilizer in the agriculture. So, when the animal waste containing the colistin resistant bacteria is used as fertilizers in Indian agriculture, such colistin resistant bacteria in turn enter the human food chain. Now, this particular article highlights that the bacteria in the human gut has mainly developed the colistin resistance mainly on account of the food origin, which raises grave concerns related to the overusage of colistin in the poultry industry. Further, with respect to your prelims, please note that apart from colistin, even tylosin is also used as a growth promoter in the poultry industry. Next, on page number 8, we have an article which is titled as Bringing Back Cheetahs Will Be a Big Challenge. Recently, the Supreme Court of India has given the green signal for the reintroduction of cheetah into India. Now, this particular article highlights that the scientists at LACONES have raised certain concerns with respect to reintroduction of cheetah into India. Now, the article related to reintroduction of cheetah has been discussed quite in detail in our DNS dated 15th of December 2019 by me. In this particular article, we had discussed about the reasons for extinction of cheetah in India, about the cheetah reintroduction project, as well as the various challenges with respect to reintroduction of cheetah in India. So these aspects of the article we will not be discussing once again. However, one important aspect of the article which becomes important with respect to prelims is the LACONES. Now, LACONES stand for the Laboratory for the Conservation of the Endangered Species. Now, this particular laboratory basically uses the modern biotechnology for the conservation of the endangered species. And for the conservation of the endangered species, the laboratory promotes both in situ as well as the ex situ conservation techniques. Please note that this particular laboratory is supported by the Department of Biotechnology, Central Zoo Authority, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and the Government of Andhra Pradesh. Now, there are two biggest achievements of the LACONES laboratory. The first biggest achievement is related to the reintroduction of mouse deer in the wild, and this was done through its captive breeding program. Secondly, in August 2018, India's first wildlife gene bank was set up under the LACONES. Now, this wildlife gene bank is known as the National Wildlife Genetic Resource Bank. Now, this particular genetic resource bank has basically been set up in order to preserve the genetic material of the animal species within India, so that if a particular animal species goes extinct, then the genetic material of the animal species can then be used. Next, on page number 14, that is the FAQ page of the Hindu newspaper, we have two important articles from the perspective of UPSC. The first article is related to the National Population Register, and the second article is related to the coronavirus. Now, these two articles we have already covered in detail in our previous DNS videos. The article on National Population Register and how NPR is linked to the National Register of Citizens. This was covered in our DNS dated 21st of December 2019. The article on coronavirus was covered in our DNS dated 19th of Jan 2020 as well as the 21st of February 2020. So I suggest you to go through these DNS in order to understand about the National Population Register as well as the coronavirus. Now, based upon our video analysis, let us now take up certain prelims-based question for your practice. The first question here is, consider the following statements related to the farmer producer organizations. The first statement here is, all the farmer producer organizations are legally registered as cooperatives under the State Cooperative Societies Act. As we have discussed, this particular statement here is wrong. This is so because the farmer producer organizations can be legally registered as the companies under the Companies Act, the cooperatives under the Cooperative Societies Act, or they can also be registered as the societies under the Societies Registration Act. The second statement reads as the NABARD acts as a nodal agency for the promotion of the FPOs within India. Even this particular statement here is wrong. This is because it is the Small Farmers Agribusiness Consortium which acts as a nodal agency for the promotion of FPOs. So accordingly, the correct answer here is D. That is neither one nor two. Now coming to second question, the question here is, India's first wildlife gene bank has been set up under which among the following organizations? And as we have discussed, the answer to this particular question is the Laboratory for the Conservation of the Endangered Species. Next, on page number 11 in the Sunday magazine, we have an article that is titled as the Buffalo Racer. Now, this particular article talks about the traditional buffalo cart race in the state of Karnataka, which is known as Kambala. Now, based upon this particular article, we have framed this particular question. Consider the following pairs of the bullock cart races and the states where they are practiced. The options here are Jallikattu in the state of Tamil Nadu, Kambala in Andhra Pradesh, Shankarpat in Maharashtra. Please note that Jallikattu is practiced in the state of Tamil Nadu, Kambala, as we have discussed, is practiced in the state of Karnataka, and Shankarpat is practiced in the state of Maharashtra. So accordingly, option number 1 and option number 3 here are correct. So the correct answer to this particular question shall be C, that is 1 and 3 only. Next, on page number 8 of the Hindu newspaper, we have an article which relates to the celebration of the Araku Utsav in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now, please note that the Araku Utsav is basically celebrated in order to promote the tribal culture. So, based upon this, we have framed a question. The question reads as, Araku is a festival promoting the tribal culture in which of the following states? And the answer to this particular question is B, that is Andhra Pradesh. With this, we have come to end of our discussion. Now, let us have a look at the question for the day.